Hi, I'm Robin Hunter. I'm a knitting designer, teacher, and blogger. Today, I'll be showing you how to create bobbles without turning the work back and forth. Now, I love textured garments. They're the kinds of pieces that people want to reach out and touch. There's several ways to make a bobble, and the execution may vary, but basically the principle is always the same. You knit to where you want the bobble, you make several stitches into a single stitch, you knit back and forth for several rows, then you decrease back down to a single stitch, and that's your bobble. In a pattern, you're normally going to see this expressed as MB, the abbreviation for make bobble, and the pattern will normally include the method they expect you to use and how many stitches that you'll be working. Now, bobbles can be decorative, or they can also be functional. In this case, I've used them as buttons on my garment. I'll be showing you 3 different ways of increasing stitches at the base of the bobble. This is the first method. Knit to where you want the bobble placed. Increase into the next stitch by knitting into the front and back of the stitch while leaving it on the left-hand needle. I'll flip the work over so you can see the back. Repeat knitting into the front and back of the original stitch until you have the required number of stitches on your needle, which is normally an odd number. This is the second method, and we use a yarn over to increase the stitches. The yarn over is worked in the opposite direction from the normal method. It wraps towards you over the top of the needle and then back. This is the third method. Knit, bring the yarn to the front between the needles and purl into the stitch on the left needle. Repeat until you have the total number of stitches required. You can choose whichever of these 3 methods you prefer. My personal favorite is method 1. Off camera, I've created my bobble. It's a 5-stitch bobble. I've knit the rows back and forth, and I'm ready to decrease to return to the original single stitch. The first method is to decrease by lifting the second stitch on your needle over the first and repeating until only one remains. This method creates a bobble that sits at a slight angle to one side. And there's the last stitch being moved over. This is the second method to do the decrease. It has the advantage of sitting on the work symmetrically. Knit the first 2 stitches together. Knit the next stitch, and then pass the knit 2 together over the single stitch. Knit the final 2 stitches together. Slip both back to the left-hand needle and pass the knit 2 together over the single center stitch with the right-hand needle. Snug that last stitch up and you can see how symmetrical the bobble is. This is a slip bobble, and it's the first method to work the bobble without turning your work back and forth. Slip all of the stitches back to the left-hand needle. Pull your yarn firmly across the far side of the knitting, then knit the stitches again, and repeat until the desired number of rows have been completed. This bobble is created in the same way that I-cord is worked if you are familiar with that technique. Make sure to pull the yarn snugly across the back of the work to ensure a nice round bobble. If you look at the back of the work, you'll be able to see the strands of the yarn crossing the back side of the bobble. Knitting backwards requires practice to build the muscle memory so that you feel comfortable with the motions. Once this skill has been perfected, it will save a lot of time making bobbles, and it can also be used when working entrelac. Insert the left-hand needle through the stitch on the right-hand needle from front to back behind the right-hand needle. Wrap the yarn from under, behind, and over the top of the left-hand needle towards you. Then, using the right-hand needle, lift the stitch over the yarn wrap on the left-hand needle. Repeat and practice until you feel comfortable with the process and your gauge matches that of your normal knitting method. I'll repeat this process a few more times for you to follow along with me. If you forget a bobble or want to add some after the knitting is complete, you can make an afterthought bobble. Knit a little square of the same +1 of the number of stitches and rows. Leave long tails at both the cast on and cast off edges. Sew the square into a circle by running the needle around the edge of the square. This is going to take me a moment to do. You can even use this method to add bobbles in contrasting color or to make bobble buttons. When you get all the way around the square, tug on the yarn to pull the square into a bobble shape. Use the yarn tails to sew to the project and bury the tails inside the bobble. Here are some extra bobble tips. To create perky bobbles, on the next wrong side row, slip the stitch that ended the bobble without knitting it. Before and after completing the bobble, make sure you knit the stitches on either side of the bobble and in the rows above firmly. This will close the hole created by the increases. Size matters. Bigger bobbles have bigger holes behind them. Smaller bobbles are often rounder in shape. Remember that a bobble can also be made in purl or seed stitch to add even more texture to your work. Now you know how to create bobbles in a more efficient manner. There's just a few more things I want to mention. The first is yarn choices. I'm going to recommend that you avoid heavy yarns like cotton. It's best to choose elastic wools. They tend to create a more pleasing shape of bobble. The final consideration is the placement of the bobbles on your body. Large numbers of bobbles in a single area will add visual weight, so it's often best to place them on the yoke. The secondary choice you can make is to put them in slimming vertical lines. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more of me, you can go to knittingrobin at blogspot.com.